I still get up every day just as energized as I was the first day I walked in here. And as long as I continue to be healthy and you know, it's an old political phrase to say you got the fire in the belly to do it, because people come in and ask you from time to time, you know, think about running, what do you think? And it's like, you know, if you don't really have a passion for it, you're not going to enjoy it. So if you don't have the fire in the belly, you know, go back and think about that. And what that means basically is if you don't have something you want to see get done, and if you're not willing to work collaboratively with people, then, you know, you're in the wrong business. And I still feel that. I've obviously got a lot more experience than I did the day I walked in here. We've done some great things working with a lot of people. And again, I think it's always important to recognize, you know, there's political leaders, but sometimes we don't give enough credit to a lot of people that make, you know, the things that we're looking for as a vision to happen, the people that make it happen for us. So I want to make sure to do that because I think it's important. I work with a great staff of people that I enjoy working with every day. I think we've been able to surround ourselves with good people, and that's a reason that things are going so well. So, you know, no, I have no intentions of retiring. I'm obviously going to finish out the term. And again, people decide who will sit in this office, not politicians. And I'm always more comfortable when the people are deciding instead of a few small people. We're growing as a county, which is a good thing, but along with the growth, you know, brings additional challenges. And certainly as it relates to Hamilton County, we do have infrastructure issues directly related to wastewater treatment. And, you know, again, I mean, we plan to address that. The WWTA is the authority, and I emphasize they're an authority. They're not part of county government. They're set up as a separate entity, much like the Electric Power Board or the Airport Authority or whatever. And they operate within themselves and answer to a board that's appointed by the county mayor and approved by the county commission. And it's their responsibility, again, moving forward, to be able to provide the wastewater treatment that we need in this county that's necessary for us to continue to have growth, and also, just as importantly, to protect the environment.
To maybe ask you to repeat yourself on that a little bit, because wastewater sewer is not exactly a glamorous topic. So how do you impress on people how much it really matters?
Well, I mean, you know, in the case of Chattanooga and Hamilton County, I mean, Chattanooga is already under a consent decree by the federal government, the Environmental Protection I should say, agency. And you're going to see, you know, WWTA sometime between now and probably the first of the year be under consent decree as well. And so basically, you know, these are regulated, the wastewater is regulated by our federal friends. And as a result, we're going to see where we're going to have to invest quite a bit of money in the system. And but it's the right thing to do because, you know, we need to continue to protect not only the environment, but also about how we dispose of our waste. So again, it's not something that's not been anticipated, but it's something I think it's necessary.
Were you surprised by the public response that WWTA got when they came to the commission for a new facility last December?
Well, again, you got to remember when the whole issue was a zoning case. A lot of people have forgotten that, but it turned into a zoning case that was going to 8 to 10 years later result in a sewage treatment plant. Possibly, it had the potential for that to address that particular part of the county. But it started as a zoning case, and no, I wasn't really. No one wants certain things in their backyard, so to speak. And so it didn't surprise me that there was an outpour of certain people in the community that did not want it, you know, near them. That never comes as a surprise. I guess what did surprise me is that the misinformation and the way it was misrepresented, and how that allowed to, you know, fester in the community at large. And So when I talk to people, even today, it was so misrepresented that there's so many myths that are out there about the wastewater treatment. And ironically, one of the things you heard was, let Tennessee American do it. And so now it's interesting, as we look at it, at our situation now, doesn't mean they couldn't do it. But again, would it have been the right choice at the time? And I just totally think that the treatment of wastewater now and in the future needs to be something that the government takes care of.
But you started off, we were talking about the Wastewater Treatment Authority.
Yes.
Which is obviously independently incorporated. It's budget neutral. Am I right about that?
Yes.
And so if indeed there is a consent decree and an investment plan that will translate into sewer rates, and as one piece of it's a high dollar infrastructure item that will be very important for the next several years, what's the smartest way to go about that? What do you think is your role, or should be the public's role in supporting the best use of that money?
Yeah. Well, I mean, going forward, I mean, like I said, I'm reasonably certain there's going to be a consent decree. When that happens, obviously, it will fall on the ratepayers with rate increases to pay whatever it costs to be able to bring the system up to the standards. And, that's going to be a very costly event, spread out over a number of years, more than a decade of investment that WWTA would have to make. There's always the discussions that go on as to how can we do it more efficiently. And doing it more efficiently, we're looking at several different measures, whether it's about consolidation of systems. Primarily, you would have to be talking about Chattanooga and WWTA. If that happens in the future, I mean, it's certainly not out of the realm of possibility. But again, as we go forward and some of those decisions get made, if it's the most cost-effective way, we certainly ought to be entertaining that. But it's still the effectiveness of the system. There's still going to be some demands on the system that are going to have to be addressed. So you got the management part of it, which may lean more towards, well, did we do something like the EPB model, or did we do something, where we put it all together? And that's a possibility, a good possibility. That takes care of the management issue. But the logistical part on the ground about how we're going to dispose of wastewater throughout all 576 square miles of this county, there still has to be a more, concise plan about how we're going to address that. And as you can tell from what we've experienced, that's not going to be an easy thing for the public to get on board. And again, it takes courage, more courage on the elected people to make these decisions, to be able to move our county and our cities. There's 10 municipalities in this county, and to move everybody forward, it's going to take some courage, and it's not easy. Believe me, when you're talking about things that are not popular, and going in, it's not popular, but they still, I think, it takes a lot more intestinal fortitude to do the right thing, to make sure that, this county's sustainable, for decades to come. And we're just caught in that time period right now where there's so much growth and so much success that we have to start addressing the infrastructure issues.
And so much deferred maintenance over the years.
Yes, I mean, we've seen what the deferred maintenance has meant to our school system. We're seeing what our deferred maintenance has meant to WWTA with wastewater. And we've got to quit, I hate to use the term, it's overused, kicking the can down the road. But it's true, we've got to quit postponing those inevitable things that's got to be paid for. And unfortunately, in most situations, they require additional funding. And I am not a person that is in favor of tax increases or any of those issues that come up, fee increases or whatever. But I do have a responsibility to all these people that live in this county to do what's best for them, and for at least them to have the opportunity to know what we're facing going forward.
You often connect the public-private initiatives now, again, with Chattanooga's well-known transformation story of the last generation.
Yes.
What lessons do you draw from that history, or how do you see it at work still in the community?
Well, I always say to people, you can stand on any block in downtown Chattanooga and look around and see the results of public-private partnerships, and one that sticks out the most that's gone on for probably the longest period of time is the Riverwalk is a prime example, and people that come here that really enjoy the Riverwalk, and they don't understand how much private dollars have gone into to making that happen. There's obviously a number of other different things as it relates to our arts here, our outdoor activities that we have, the recreation that attracts people here, and then the events that we have that are sponsored by, the private sector. All of this has led us to where we are today, which is, a thriving community, a vibrant downtown Chattanooga, which is important to all of Hamilton County, that we have a vibrant downtown Chattanooga. And that's why we invest so much of our dollars from hotel motel tax back into recruiting for businesses that are going to help our hotels and are going to help our restaurants and bring people here. And guess what? Some of them stay. Some of them come here for an Ironman or a softball tournament or a soccer tournament, and they like it so much they stay. So it's a great investment of our hotel motel tax. And again, it all starts with the public-private partnerships that we've enjoyed for so many years. And probably the most notable is the aquarium that was built with private dollars. But again, of what it is today and what it means to our community, and a number of other, facilities like that people have invested in because they feel good about where we are and the leadership, the past leadership and hopefully the current leadership.
I've also heard you say that the next great step in the ongoing transformation for Chattanooga and Hamilton County is in public education.
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
Yes. Well, we know from recruitment we've had, again, it goes back to the success we've had bringing new companies here, also being able to not only retain but have our existing companies expand. We know what's critical to them is a workforce. And in order to create that workforce, we have to put more emphasis on our public education system. And, it's really simple. It's twofold for me. One, you have to ask yourself, do we really value education here in Hamilton County? And I think that the majority, over 90% of the people say, yes, I really value, education, whether it's going to post-secondary or whether it's getting a certificate and being able to go into the workforce. But people will say they value education. And the second part is, are you comfortable that we're as far along as where we need to be? And I've asked that question in large groups, small groups of all sizes. Raise your hand if you're comfortable that you think we've done all we can do and the school system's great, and never has there been one hand ever raised. So it tells us that there's a lot of work to do. I think we're going in the right direction with Dr. Brian Johnson. He's doing an outstanding job, but he needs additional resources to take it to the levels that we're talking about, where we can continue to create that workforce and continue to give our young people the resources they need to be successful once they graduate high school and they choose to go to post-secondary or they go into the workforce.
One of the other things that you talk about very often that I would love to you explain for anybody listening is the importance of a AAA bond rating for Hamilton County and what difference that really makes to our whole outlook.
Yes. Well, we have a AAA bond rating, as many people know, from the top 3 rating agencies in this country. That's Standard & Poor's, Moody's, and Fitch. And a lot of people will tell you they have a AAA bond rating, but Not all of them have them from all three rating agencies, and it's extremely important to the taxpayers of this county because it affords us the opportunity to sell bonds and for us to get a lower interest rate to repay those bonds. And our bonds are all 15 years bonds, where most people are doing 30-year bonds, which helps us with our ratings as well. We've also been extremely fiscally conservative in having a good fund balance that exceeds really what we have to have. But again, it gives us the opportunity when something like an expansion at a Volkswagen comes up, or an expansion of an existing company here that may take millions of dollars of cash from the city or the county or both, which has been the case. We have that money readily available to be able to have these businesses. And people say, why would you give them any money to do that? Well, if you're going to give them $2 million to add on $500 million expansion and create another 1,000 jobs, it's probably a great spend of that money. And a lot of people, that we have trouble when people talk about tax incentives about, why do you incentivize these people to come here? They ought to want to come here anyway. Well, it's still very, very competitive. And we want our people in our community to have the opportunity at these good jobs, and these stable jobs. And sometimes it takes incentivizing them. And if we didn't have the availability of money that we have in what people refer to as a rainy day fund, but we refer to it as a general fund balance, we wouldn't be able to take advantage of some of those opportunities.
And that, like you said, fiscal conservatism does very often mean hard trade-offs.
Yes.
And smart investments.
Right.
And I would hope, it's certainly what I would try to contribute with this, is that should bring a level of seriousness to the public conversation about the role of county government, where we go, how we move forward.
Yes.
Do you have a message on that? What do you think is the responsibility that we all should take as citizens in Hamilton County?
Well, I think it's really critical. I mean, I always say there's generally, 4 things you can always look at that's really the responsibility of county government and the leadership in county government to move forward. And obviously that's about the economic development part of being able to recruit businesses, to be able to, sustain the growth that we have. Coupled with that is obviously job creation, to be able to create more jobs, and give people an opportunity to stay here with good paying jobs. And the third piece of that is public education. We have got to continue to be better with what we're doing with public education. I mean, I think we're on the right track now. I think it's, there's some work to be done there, obviously, in providing some resources. And again, the last part of that is to be able to enhance the quality of life here. To some people that may mean a river walk. Some people that may mean more arts. And to some people that's outdoor recreation. But everyone, whether you live here or work here or play here or even retire here, as we like to say, there's something for everyone. And we need to continue that, to be really diverse so that people will be attracted to come here and not only work, but to stay here and be part of the community. We're going to grow. We're going to continue to grow. We got a diverse economy here. That's why we've been able to weather recessions in the past, and we still have that diversity that will help us to continue in the event that there is another recession. And history shows there's going to be recessions, right? So in preparation for that, we have to know that we have to do the best we can during the good times to be able to build that infrastructure, to have the things in place that are going to continue to sustain the growth. And if not sustain the growth, to not go backwards. And if you're not going forwards, in my opinion, if you're just stable, then you're not moving. And we need to be moving forward at all times.
And there are challenges as much as opportunities with growth.
Yeah.
We're talking about
Well, challenges are opportunities, don't you think? I mean, we talk about that a lot. I mean, we're challenged, thankfully, we're challenged every day But we look at those as opportunities, to help enhance someone's quality of life, to help, our young people, whether it's with a better education or to help our people in our neighborhoods deal with wastewater or stormwater. There's so many different ways, but there are challenges. There's challenges with streets and that portion of infrastructure, but there's also some good opportunities there to make a great impact on the future.
Is it worth really focusing on the risks of falling behind as we?
Oh, I never think about falling behind. We're not going to do that. We'll continue to forge forward, and it's really important to know. I mean, I think anybody in a leadership role is you're always preparing, and you have the vision that you're moving forward. You never think about what if we stop moving. That's not an option, in my opinion.
The second infrastructure piece, not as intuitive to people as infrastructure, but it's obviously vitally important to public safety in the community,
yes.
especially as the county jail
yes.
and the workhouse out at Silverdale.
Yes.
And they were allocated new funds for some
right.
new hires downtown to explore expansion at Silverdale in 2017.
Yes.
What progress have you seen in the
yeah.
last 2 years? What do you anticipate?
Great question. Well, there's a number of pieces to your question there that we're doing that I'm really excited about. I'm not excited that we're prepared right now to invest $20 million to do some renovations at our Silverdale facility, but it is necessary. I mean, people are going to always continue to misbehave, and there's got to be a place for them, and there's got to be a humane place, and that's what we're working for there. And but we are adding personnel to the sheriff's department with jailers. We are paying them better so we can have some retention at our jails. I think that's important. But we are implementing some programs. And, there are people out there that will hear this and say, if just lock them up. And, some of the people, it would shock people to understand that, somewhere between 35 to 40, maybe even higher percent of these people have some mental illness issues, and the jail's not really the place for them. They come to the jail, they get on their medications, and generally they're fine. They go back out in the community, they quit using their medications, they come back into the jails, and it's costing the taxpayers right now right at $100,000 a day to keep people locked up. So there's been a couple of programs that we're working with. I mean, we've also obviously got an ankle bracelet program. They're starting the Fuse program that's been successful other places. We have a mental health court. We have a drug court. And all of this is in an effort to make certain that the people that are in jail are the bad people that really need to be there, and that the taxpayers not having to foot the bill, for people that just have a mental illness and need to be on medication, or people that, that have a drug addiction, that we can help, get them off of that addiction. And so there's a number of different ways that we're now trying to address those issues. Tremendous amount of cooperation out of the sheriff and his people, and so hopefully we'll see a difference in the years to come. And we won't have to build so many jails, or jail cells, I should say.
Building new jail cells does feel important at some level. Overcrowding downtown has been a perennial issue. And in speaking with the chief of corrections over there, and the current strategy for relieving overcrowding downtown is to move pretrial inmates out to Silverdale.
Yes.
Very often they're in the general population with convicted criminals. And from a conservative standpoint, talking about innocent until proven guilty, about ensuring the protection of constitutional rights of people before they ever see a judge, but are in the workhouse after.
Yes.
What accountability do you want to see? How do you make sure from your position that everybody's rights are upheld, that everybody's safe?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's actually the responsibility of the sheriff, but one of the things that, in working with the sheriff and working with our local judges, is bringing awareness about the fact that we have so many pretrial misdemeanors that are in jail, and the judges are working with this and very cooperative. We actually have a liaison between my office and the courts that's in constant contact with them every day to see where we are, and the cooperation from the judicial branch has been phenomenal. And again, they're hearing cases every day. It's not for them to decide about jail space, right? I mean, that's the sheriff's responsibility and the responsibility of county general government to see that we have space for those that need to be there. But again, trying to address people that have been convicted is what we really in the jail cells, and people that are committing the serious crimes, the serious felonies. That's the people we want to see, the public protected from.
Do you anticipate any more investments needed at the jail or at Silverdale in the coming years?
Yes, I do think we're going to unfortunately have to invest over the next several years and even over the next decade, continue to invest money to not only renovate our jails at Silverdale, but also to add space. And but again, we're growing in population as well, and so we're experiencing what a lot of other mid-sized counties experience. Is a jail issue. It's people that misbehave, and again, some of them are pretty serious offenders.
Is there either in dollar amount or in priority as you look at coming fiscal years, what do you think that investment might look like?
Yeah. Well, our goal was and is to try to set aside, $20 million. But again, I mean, we just went through a real budget challenge, and I always say to people, a lot of the focus was about education, but we also have public safety issues such as the jail, infrastructure issues. It just happened that all this focus was on public education because there's a big need there to be able to straighten that system up, because there is a direct correlation between how people are performing at a third grade level about how many jail spaces you need. So, we were trying to do the proactive thing and not have to build more jail space, but we will continue to have to fund until we get to the level that the sheriff's obviously comfortable with.
And that is exactly the question that I'm most interested in. Deferring an investment now creates more costs.
Absolutely. We've seen that in the past, and I have no reason. I've always said, again, you've heard it, past indicators of predictor of the future, and I do think that I don't want to say the lack. It's really the lack of deferred maintenance that we've made, funding that we've made available. It's so easy because it's all the taxpayers' money, and you want to be very mindful of that, and you don't want to invest money where people, the taxpayers whose money it is, don't think it's necessary. And one of the things people tend to not care much for is investing money in people that misbehave. And so there's no support out there to increase jail space or to spend their dollars. It's just that we have a responsibility. We have to do it. And so in all honesty, when you have to choose between, are you going to better equip and better train your officers, or are you going to invest more money on jail cells? Well, I hope we all agree that we need to better equip our officers to protect them. But the fact of the matter is we need to be doing both. And, in the past, we've obviously chosen the personal safety of our officers over any big renovations, if you will.
On that note, in the last several weeks, I want to ask you about the last round of criticism against Sheriff Hammond and the Sheriff's Department for alleged misconduct of officers, and a coalition of black pastors, especially in town, have been calling for his resignation. Yeah. Or if you have a position on that?
No, I mean, the sheriff is a constitutional office, and he's been sheriff in this county. He's a very popular sheriff throughout the state, but he's a popular sheriff, and I think, he's always like myself. You're always willing. He's sat down with all groups that are interested in sitting down with him and having that discussion. I think that's what's important. I've seen it from afar and read it in the newspaper, and I saw where he was. He had met with the African American pastors that you're referring to, and again, I think as elected people, that's what all of us have a responsibility, and he's met that part of it. It doesn't mean he's got an investigation that's going on with the TBI and I believe the DA's office, and he's waiting for those outcomes. But Sheriff Hammond has always shown that he's going to do what's best for this community and best for this county, and I suspect he will in this case as well.
Could you describe the decision-making process when you first knew that the budget for the schools needed to be increased, that you would take the lead in calling for a property tax increase to fund that? How was that? How did you start off that process?
Well, first and foremost, I've never been a huge proponent of property tax increases. Unfortunately, there's only two ways you can get increase in revenue here in Hamilton County, and that's either through property tax or sales tax. We do get grants, but those are usually one time. They're not something that will sustain something as big as education. So it wasn't an easy decision because I'm not, nor have I asked for taxes. There was some discussion. We did it just for capital needs in 2017, where 2/3 of the county received a tax increase. And don't want to ignore that. That was a tax increase. But in this particular opportunity that we had, there have been several things we had asked the Department of Education to do. And one was to look at a long-term strategic plan. They did that. We looked and said, if you want us, if you can show us not only the need for the money, but where it is going to be impactful, then let's have a conversation. And then leadership's always important, and I think Dr. Johnson's done an outstanding job of his leadership. So where did that leave me? In the discussions, when we started early on, which is in January, before we really went public, I guess in late April, started looking at what was in this budget. Now, I can honestly say, as a person that's put together 9 or 10 budgets for this entire county, there's never been any budget I've ever done that I liked everything in it. There's always been things I did not like, but that were necessary. And there were some things in the education budget that I wasn't crazy about, but there were a whole lot of things that I knew that were extremely important to the future of our young people and the future of this county. For example, some of the things that didn't play out that were not able to be funded were things like post-secondary preparation in our education system, to be able to offer post-secondary opportunity for advanced placement classes in every high school. So that takes care of the people that want to go to college, that they're prepared, because we're not having a great success rate. We graduate people and then they end up not prepared for college to be successful. Even end up in some remedial stuff on the front end classes. And so I thought it was important that we were able to do that for the future. The other piece was that was just as exciting to me. It was going to offer people that chose not to go to college an opportunity in what they called Hamilton Promises, which was going to be people that want to get a certificate, people that were doing internships, whether it was with companies like Stomp or Volkswagen or whoever it may be, an opportunity to go right into the workforce, because everyone doesn't aspire to go to college and doesn't necessarily need to go to college. I mean, so this budget that was put together by the Department of Education, it allowed every student that opportunity. There were a number of resources that were going to go into the classroom that I thought were really critical as it related to technology. I mean, we're living in a time where, if you got a cell phone today, that cell phone in 6 months is likely going to not be current anymore. technology is moving really quickly, and I think in some instances would help our young people even as it relates to having to buy textbooks, for example. It could be done with technology, so there was going to be some savings long term. But I just felt like we needed to be preparing right now for what's going to be out there in the years to come, and this was the right time to do it because the school system had proven that they were spending wisely. We knew they were accomplishing. I honestly didn't know they were going to have fives across the board on improvements, which was historical, but felt pretty good that we were in a good place. And if you're out in these schools a lot, you can feel that. And I certainly could sense that was happening. There's something going on. There's a momentum out there that we hadn't had before. And I wanted to try to make that momentum stronger. And I knew it was going to take giving the school system more resources at a time when we're on the move and we're advancing, and then we knew there were going to be the deferred maintenance issues as well. So we wanted to be able to address these operational issues. You got to remember, as you look back, and I certainly did, and thought, and there were some sleepless nights for me about this before I came out and said we ought to do it. And one of the things is we've not done anything to help with the operations other than growth, and people will always point out how many millions of dollars we get in growth. But in addition to that, we've outgrown the growth, okay? So there's not enough money for us to have the resources to do all of the things to make us a good, strong, sustainable school system. And so I just felt like it was the right opportunity with the momentum we had, with the leadership that we have, and with the improvements that they had already made, and with this strategic plan to say, we can go to the people and we can show the people that if you will, have any confidence or any trust that your money will be spent wisely, then, now's the time to do that. I do believe the majority of the people out there do think, and that doesn't mean that everybody wants a tax increase. I'm not that crazy to believe that. But I do believe the majority of the people out there are starting to see and develop that sense that the money's going to be used, to have an effective and an efficient school system, and they've proven that. So, what the future holds, none of us really know. But I do know, that it was extremely important, to at this particular time to try to reach out and make a difference. And I hope I hope our young people get that opportunity. And it's going to be really hard doing that. $10 million is a lot of money. It's a lot of money. I wish I had $10 million. It's a lot of money. But when you start talking about operating a school system, and you start talking about the needs that you have, and if you grow by 10 million or even 15 million, you can gobble that up pretty quickly, and just in what it takes you in personnel. The other part of that is I did feel very strongly that we needed to do more for our teachers. I did feel that that we're having a retention problem, and we're not getting the best of the best. We're getting some good teachers out of college, people that that are going to make great teachers, but we also know that we're losing a lot of those people to the surrounding area because they're paying more, and so I did feel that was a big piece of it too. There was the academic piece, but there was also the reoccurring cost of teachers, and we saw how much that was going to be just in teachers' salaries alone. But again, I mean, I think what we were able to accomplish was a great dialogue and conversation countywide. Unfortunately, if you look like you're going to put your hand in somebody's pocket is when they're going to start pushing back, but you get their attention, right? And so I think the important thing is that we started a really good conversation. And you have to remember, the thing is, when we first started, I'm not sure how many people we thought we could get, it was a 5-4 vote in the end to not support it. But then again, as you look, and most of us that run for elections, one of the things that I've always said and always stood strongly on is how much I support public education. And, and if you really support it, and most people do, everybody says that, but everybody may have a different means of what they think, that means. But for me, it was like, look, I know it's not going to be a popular thing to do, but I do know it's the right thing to do. And I do know that I've always said that if I ever felt, in a position where I was really comfortable that it would be spent, the way that it should be spent, which is helping our young people, helping our teachers, and helping on all of our school administration and staff be in a better place, then I could support it. And that lined up for me. And it didn't for everybody, but it did for me.
And I know you say that everybody supports public education, but a lot of what came out during this debate was people who were very actively saying that we don't trust the school district, that we should be cutting the budget for public schools, not increasing it.
Right.
Lots of other arguments made, and you've been very vocal about the disinformation that was involved at that time. What surprised you?
I mean, it's always interesting when, I always say to people, when someone says that they don't trust the school system, or if I say I don't trust you, then you should immediately say, well, what is it that you got a problem with? And, what we saw as a blanket was basically people would say, well, they're just going to waste the money. And it's like, but we've said that for so long in this county that people believe that. It's hard to break down that barrier now. So my challenge really to all of us is we should start asking people. Then, it's really popular to say they got too many people in central office. Well, I put together a group of independent business people that looked at this and came back and said exactly the opposite. That said, look, as large as they are, if they had a few more people to do like auditing or whatever, they would save more money to be able to help them in other areas. But they're cut so thin in their administrative portion of it. So, and then people are like, well, who do we believe? And usually, it's I found in this job it's a lot easier to be against something than it is for something. So in order to be for, you look at the size of the school system, it's a large employer, and you compare it to other employers in similar size, and you see what their staffs look like. And that's basically what this independent group that had nothing to do with education, only looking at the finances, came back and reported is, wait a minute, they're not overstaffed at the central office. And so it's really hard to break that down because for so many years, it's so easy, and we heard it again this time, well, there's so much waste. And then when you would ask somebody, tell me specifically where you think that waste is. Well, central office. Well, we can kind of disprove that. And here's an independent, and by the way, call them. These are people in your community. Call them. They're very successful people. And, they're like, well, I just don't trust them. But we've got to get past that. I mean, again, you elect your school board members to watch that money, and they are the boss of the superintendent. So there is a check and balance for every penny spent.
When you think about the local political landscape, what do you think is you said it also came out with the wastewater treatment facility last December, and then watching it play out this summer, the kind of politics of disinformation taking root locally. Is that a concern of yours? What do you...
I mean, I think it's been the case since the beginning of time. But I will say this. I mean, everybody doesn't want to see success. Everybody doesn't want to see the school system be successful. They don't want to see, certain individuals, certain elected people, and whether it's me or anybody, be successful. Unfortunately, we live in that we're in probably some of the most divisive times in this nation, let alone trickling down this far. But because of that, unfortunately, there is that misrepresentation, that misinformation. I call them the half-truths that get out there that just fit whatever the scenario may be for that day, and it's unfortunate because it alarms people that that are really busy, raising their families, being able, some working two jobs to be able to make ends meet or whatever. They don't have time to really focus in to hear what's going on, and I always said that if you would be fortunate enough, there's now 364,000 people that live in this county. If you could stand in front of all of them and be able to explain exactly why you're doing what you're doing, they may still disagree, but at least they would understand, and they wouldn't be getting that information off of the social media, be it Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, wherever it is. And that's one of the biggest obstacles right now with public relations and public information. There's so many sources out there that are not places to get your information. They're people's opinions. And I like to say that we want to deal just solely in facts, and hopefully the public will, understand that that's what we do, and hopefully they try to get more facts and more sources. But if you're getting your information off of social media, be careful.
What was your first reaction when you did see the school facilities report when that came out?
It was a little higher than I anticipated, but I was pretty comfortable that it would be bumping $1 billion. I mean, just given where we were before and where we are now, and we got some real challenges going ahead. I mean, I'll be very candid with you. I was sitting with Dr. Johnson, and we heard a lot during the debate about the school's budget about operating like a business. And government provides a service, and there's very few services that we provide where we actually make any money. We're just providing services, but there was a lot of outcry about the school system should operate as a business. And so here comes the deferred maintenance report from a third party, not from here, that says, you guys are too large. You need to, consolidate these schools and close and do whatever. And then the next day my phone lights up with some of the same people who said it needs to run like a business, saying, not my school. And you're saying, well, I mean, I always use the comparison. If the Sears company in Chicago says we're going to close 100 stores in the United States, and they come and they pick Northgate, which they did, and they picked it because of the low sales and the low volume there, but they keep Hamilton Place. They do that based on a decision, strictly a business decision based on the model that makes them the most money. And so if you were going to do that in the school system and you were going to close schools with the least population and consolidate them or whatever, that's what a business model would do. Fortunately, we've got a superintendent that's going to go back out to the community and listen to the community before any such decisions would be, considered or done. But I mean, it's always, people always look at government and say that, it should be more run like a business, and some of it should. I would agree with some should be in a business, but it's kind of difficult when you're a government and you got to put things out for bid. It's the law, and I certainly applaud that law, because if you didn't, in the old days, I'm not saying here in Hamilton County, but in the old days you used to hear about, brothers and aunts and uncles. Everybody used to get all the contracts and whatever. So government over the years, decades ago, said, all this stuff, everybody's going to have a fair chance at this. So you have to bid every single item that you get to give everybody a chance. And so I happen to think part of that drives the cost up and to do business. So, but it's the right thing to do to keep people honest and to make sure that everybody has an equal opportunity to get these contracts. But at the same time, it makes you cost more, whereas the private sector would go out and hire somebody, maybe do a design build for a building, whether it's a school or whatever it may be, and they may be able to do it more cheaply, but that's because they don't have to go through the same processes, which is what the people really want government to do, to be, to be fair and transparent and all of those words that we talk about. But in order to do that, sometimes you got to pay more. And that's a hard thing for, a fiscal conservative like myself. When you see those numbers come in, you're like, how could such and such cost $500,000? And it's the lowest bid. The next bid was like 570, and the next one, that came in was like 6 something. But you're doing it at the best and the cheapest dollar you can get it. But still, the private sector may be able to do it for 300. And unfortunately, that's what keeps us from running like a business. But it's not a bad thing. It's I think people expect their government to be regulated that way. I mean, I know, having been part of it, and the experience I have, I think it's a good thing, but it's more expensive.
The report obviously had its headline number based on if you brought every existing school, every existing program up to the highest standard. And the process now is how to consolidate those figures, or how to find the best use or targeted use of what money we are able to raise.
Right.
What is your thinking about I would like to think that this represents an opportunity to rethink the school system as a whole.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it does present some great opportunities. Anytime you have a third party like that that's doing an overall review of your buildings or whatever, it helps going forward to determine to prioritize what you want to do first. But and sometimes over a period of time, and we've been able to consolidate a couple of schools. The school systems worked on that, and I'm sure they're going to continue. But none of it has come without a little bit of pain. You take 2 schools that were nearly 100 years old, like Fallen Water and Mill Valley, and you put them together. Well, that didn't make everybody happy, believe me. Fallen Water was a nice little community school that they wanted to keep, but the issue is about well, at what point does it make sense that you've got this extra amount of expense? And same thing. I mean, of course, Middle Valley was a little bit better positioned because the community was still growing there, and we've got that going on right now with the construction of Harrison Elementary. They're looking at consolidating at least 2, maybe 3 schools there, and it won't come without some hand-wringing and a little bit of angst. But you listen to what the public says they want, and again, it goes back to what I think we were talking about earlier. If you go anywhere else in this county other than Fallen Water and Middle Valley, everybody that would look at that would say, well, that makes sense. But if you go to Fallen Water and Mill Valley, they're like, well, why'd you pick us? And so, again, it goes back to what we've been talking about. You only really get engaged if it's going to be, a plan or a program that, in fact, impacts you or your family. So there's going to be some real challenges going forward with the school system and turning these buildings. We have built and renovated a tremendous amount just in the short time I've been here. When you go and look at the list of new schools and the renovations taking place and the hundreds of millions of dollars that's been spent on it, you say, wow, how are we still in that bad a shape? Well, it's because we've got 79 school buildings, and it takes a long time to get around to them. I mean, it's hard for me to realize when you think about Signal Mountain Middle High School, or you think about East Hamilton Middle High, they're bumping on 10 years old now. And I still think of them as, well, they're relatively new. So in a blink of the eye, they're going to be 30 years old. and someone else will have to make the decision then about, fortunately, we build buildings with the intent of them lasting more than 50 years, which costs more money on the front end too. And you hear criticism about that as well. But again, that we've invested in this county. The taxpayers have invested a lot of capital as far as building schools, renovating schools, and then you see what we're still left with, $1.36 billion in deferred maintenance. So it's not like no one's working on it, and it's not like $1.36 billion is going to get done in the next 1, 2, 5, 10 years. It's going to take a while to get around to it, but it's going to take a lot of patience and involvement from the community, the entire county, to say what you want, what you expect, and let's look at it, in its totality, not just what's good for a neighborhood or a community. Let's look at what's going to work for all of Hamilton County. So that instead of having to spend so much money on brick and mortars, we can get better resources in the classroom, because we're obligated to do that as well.
That's why I started off, and I try to bring all these local conversations back to the legacy of public vision that transformed the community in the last generation. And what you're talking about is, I would hope, a vision for how it all comes together.
Yeah. And I think, we've done some great things in Hamilton County, and certainly in Chattanooga. And I've said this, and I've meant it. I mean, the riverfront and what we've done there has been amazing, and it helps bring and attracts people here. There's the revitalization downtown, cleaning up the environment. All of these things have been something we've all worked on together that were very costly, extremely costly, hundreds of millions of dollars to do it. I just think the next big thing that we need to be working on is to fix our public education. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to, I've always said the first person that ever fixes public education in this country is going to be a billionaire overnight, because it's not easy or it had already been done, right? But what I mean by fixing our public education system, I mean with our young people having the opportunity, whether they want to graduate high school with an opportunity to be successful in post-secondary, or whether they can go out and get a job because they're carrying a certificate with them that will help them in a workplace. That's what I'm leaning towards success. A school system where we increase our graduation rate, a school system, we're doing a lot better at K through 3 on our literacy. That was something I didn't mention earlier, but again, I mean, these are all things they want to do. The school system is, begging to do, but they're going to take additional resources. And so it goes back to the two things I talked about earlier. Do we value education? And if we do you think we're where we need to be? Or do we need to put more funding into K through 3? Since, again, we're measuring at third grade, are we going to build more jail cells? So there's a direct correlation with education and everything we do in this county, and the successes that we have in this county, whether it's recruiting businesses or whether it's public safety or any issue. It all comes back and evolves around what are we doing with public education. And I should take this as an opportunity to say we got some outstanding private schools, charter schools, home schools. They do a really great job. But what government is responsible for in this county and other counties as well is the public school system is what it's responsible for. And so I feel a tremendous amount of responsibility there for us to make a difference, and not for me to make a difference, but for our county, all of the people working together to make a difference, to be impactful on the future of our public school system, to give our young people an opportunity. And I want to tell you, a lot of this people will talk about, and there is a direct relationship between poverty and our schools and how they perform. But you can go in any district, in all 9 districts of this county, and there's poverty in each one of them. So a lot of times people only associate poverty with inner city. They don't associate it, and anybody that listens to this, whatever community they listen that they reside in, are probably going to scratch their head and say, not far from here, I know what he's talking about, because I've been throughout this county for a number of years, and there's pockets of poverty. So we want to lift as many people as we can. We want to lift them out of that, to give them an opportunity, and we know education is their way. And whether they get a certificate to go make a good living in that environment, or if they go to post-secondary, but we want to try to break that cycle.
Thank you for saying all that. It leaves me with just one more question, which is, talking again about the $1.4 billion headline number, even if that was brought down by half, let's say, and the public school system already being the greatest part of the county budget overall, what are our options for coming up with anything like that amount of money?
Yeah.
Not even counting the other big investments that may well be needed.
Well, let me answer it this way. There's a, you and I talked about challenges and opportunities. There are many challenges with what we're going to do with capital investments in the school system, and then there's separate from that is the operation portion. But again, these challenges present with a lot of opportunity, and what I really look forward to. And here's why: because you got an independent company that's going to spend some time between now and the first of the year in January out into the community, getting input and saying, well, we've already unveiled what we think you should do. Now, we need some feedback from you. So you really want to encourage people to go and give some honest feedback. And then when they submit that, the school board is going to have an opportunity to look and say, okay, I agree with this, I disagree. And that's the great thing. The consultant is not going to make that decision. It's going to be the superintendent working with the school board. They'll come up with a path. And so once we were able to look at that at the first of the year and see, what it is that the Department of Education wants to try to prioritize to tackle first, and that's when I'll be interested in sitting down and having the discussion. But I think right now there are so many challenges and opportunities that it's too early to say, what's going to be the top 5 priorities that we want to do and we want to address over the next few years, because there is going to be some funding issues, and where would that revenue come from? Will we continue to try to do it from just growth money, or what are we going to do, and how seriously are we going to take this? Like I said, I wish everybody had the opportunity over the, from January to whenever we got a budget passed, to have sat in with the conversations that I was involved in, both good and bad, both for and against, to be able to weigh those, to see, how we derived at the position of where we wanted to be in this office at this particular time. Because, again, you got to remember, you can't look back. You can't say, what we do know is we haven't done anything, as I've said earlier, for operations in 14 years. We did something for capital in 2017, but you can't look back. All you can do is you look at what you did in 2017, and what we do in here is you say, okay, where did that put us? Well, that moved the ball some for us, right? But you can't keep saying that, well, I don't want to do anything else because I did this in 17. Well, okay, there's many things that we do in our lives that you say, okay, well, I did that 10 years ago, but you learn from what you did and you do more. You try to better yourself, better your life, and I think it's the same here. We can look at what we did and say, yeah, we made a sizable investment in 17, but we did sizable investments prior to that too. But we got to start saying, this is where we are, this is where we want to be, and how are we going to, measure out how far we're going to go each phase to get to where we want to be, which again is to give our young people an opportunity to excel, and that's what I'm all about.
Commissioner Smedley's talked about the idea of public referendum for dedicated revenue. Does that idea make sense to you?
I mean, I think when people talk about public referendums, they're talking about things like wheel tax and increasing the sales tax. You know, I've more of the opinion because see, here's the difference. Before I was involved in being in an elected position, and I had the privilege to serve as a commissioner. And what people would tell me constantly was, look, you're in the meetings, you're in the discussions, you're in the fray, you understand what's going on. You know, I just expect you to represent me well. You know, you understand, you need to be up on what's going on, and whether you're voting for a zoning case or whatever you're voting for, you know what the people in your district want. Okay, so with referendums. I'm not opposed. I always, believe me, I'm always more comfortable when a large number of people are making a decision as opposed to small groups. But I don't think that, you know, if you ran and said we're going to do a wheel tax to increase the revenue, and you said, okay, first of all, are you going to declare that where that revenue is going to go? Because I think the people need to know. I mean, you know, if you're gonna do a wheel tax, why are you going to do a wheel tax, regardless of what that amount may be, and how much revenue is that going to generate? Where is it going, and what kind of impact? Because if it's not going to be something that's going to make a large impact, then I can't even support that. Same thing with sales tax. We're at 9 1/4 right now. You can go as much as 9 3/4. If the people would vote for that. As a matter of fact, the wheel tax doesn't even require a referendum. The commission could do that. But if let's say that you were going to raise the sales tax and the wheel tax, where's the money going to go, and what kind of impact? Because I am not for just raising a fee or a tax or anything unless you can go to the public and say, this is what we're going to do with it. You know, we're committing it to whatever it is, and this is where, you know, we hope to be impactful. And if it falls short of making the impact, then I just don't think you should do it.
Mr. Mayor, you've been more than generous with your time.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.